Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 4 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on 4th Canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. And we are in the 2nd chapter. We're well into the 2nd chapter actually, and we'll be carrying on. We may finish, I assume we'll finish the whole 2nd chapter today. We may even go on to the 3rd chapter, it's possible. Okay, so here we go. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachade Shatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatarubhyas cha kripa sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So devotees, on we go now into the 5th section. Brigu curses the followers of Lord Shiva, from verse 27 to verse 32. The previous section was Nandishvara, who's the close associate of Lord Shiva, cursing Daksha and the Brahmins who are followers of Daksha for Daksha's offensive talking about Lord Shiva, and those Brahmins for not objecting to the offensive talk of Daksha. So he cursed them on behalf of Lord Shiva. Now here's Brigu going to curse the followers of Lord Shiva on behalf of Daksha. So verse 27. When all the hereditary Brahmins were thus cursed by Nandishvara, the sage Brigu, as a reaction, condemned the followers of Lord Shiva with this very strong Brahminical curse. So Prabhupada makes the point here that this is a Brahminical curse which is very strong, and Prabhupada the verse uses the term durachya. Durachya means insurmountable. Sure, really. So, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the laws of nature are insurmountable, so a Brahman's curse is also insurmountable. But in Bhagavad Gita, it makes the point that all these types of materialistic curses, they are material. And material curses, material benedictions also, they're all material. So in one sense, because they're all on the material level, they're all on the same platform, being material. So material blessings, material curses, we don't really distinguish, we're not really interested. So rather to get out of the whole material situation, we should just take shelter of the Lord, as the Lord recommends in Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Prabhupada quotes 2 of the lines, Mam avi prapadyante, mayam etan taranti te. Yes, that Daivi Yesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Durachya. That this material nature is very difficult to get out of, but if you take shelter of me, you can. So the best thing is transcend curses, material curses and blessings. Take shelter of the Lord. If you can do that, you'll always be peaceful. And people who are peaceful like that, they never get cursed and they don't curse. That's the transcendental position. So, okay, verse 28, this is now that very strong Brahminical curse of Bhrigu Muni on behalf of Daksha against the followers of Lord Shiva. Verse 28. One who takes a vow to satisfy Lord Shiva, or who follows such principles, will certainly become an atheist and be diverted from transcendental scriptural injunctions. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point that sometimes followers of Lord Shiva imitate him. He drank an ocean of poison, so some of them imitate and they take intoxicants like ganja. So the curse is that if someone does like that, means, as the verse says, either takes a vow to satisfy Lord Shiva or particularly follows the principles, follows those principles of the followers of Lord Shiva, then they become an infidel. They turn against the Vedic principles. And in this way, they'll become Sachchastra Paripantina. Sachchastra Paripantina means opposed to the conclusions of Shastra. And Prabhupada points out this is also confirmed in Padma Purana. And after all, Lord Shiva was ordered by the Lord to preach Mayavad, just like Buddha preached voidism for a particular purpose. And Prabhupada goes on to the second paragraph. Sometimes it's necessary to preach a doctrine against the Vedic conclusion. Just like Prabhupada just mentioned, Lord Shiva told Parvati in Kali Yuga he would appear in the body of a Brahmin and preach Mayavad, which is Asat Shastra. It's against the eternal principles. Mayavadam Asat Shastram. Asat Shastra means the doctrine of Mayavad, which is not in Shastra. So Bhrigu is cursing the followers of Lord Shiva. You'll become Mayavadis. And even despite that, besides that, some of them lead devilish lives. Some Shivites, that's really bad. Eat meat, they're cannibals, some of them. Oh, Krishna. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Srimad Bhagavatam and Narada Pancharatra are authorized scriptures that are considered Sat Shastra, or scriptures which lead one to the path of God realization. Asat Shastras are just the opposite. So, Bhrigu continues in verse 29. Those who vow to worship Lord Shiva are so foolish that they imitate him by keeping long hair on their heads. When initiated into worship of Lord Shiva, they prefer to live on wine, flesh, and other such things. So Prabhupada makes the point, first of all, that drinking wine, eating meat, keeping long hair, not bathing, smoking ganja, and so on, these are the habits, some of the habits of, Prabhupada says, foolish creatures, unregulated fools. In this way they become devoid of transcendental knowledge. And, oh my God, Krishna. Prabhupada says, in the initiation into the Shiva mantra, there are mudrik ashtaka, in which it is sometimes recommended that one make his sitting place on the vagina and thus desire nirvana or dissolution of existence. This is insanity. It's full-scale insanity. So in that process, wine is needed, or in its place, palm tree juice converted into an intoxicant. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this is also offered according to Shiva Agama, a scripture on the method of worshipping Lord Shiva. Okay, verse 30. Bhrigu Muni continued, since you blaspheme the Vedas and the Brahmins, who are followers of the Vedic principles, it is understood that you have already taken shelter of the doctrine of atheism. Okay, let's have a look at the purport. So Bhrigu Muni said that these followers of Lord Shiva, they'll become atheists. Not only will they become atheists, but they already are. They're already atheists because they've blasphemed the Vedas. Yeah. And the Brahminical class also. So human civilization, though it's based on Varnashram, which is the basic principle of Vedic civilization, and the Vedas give right directions for advancing if you're materialistic in Dharma, Artha, and Kama, and then eventually you can come to moksha. Otherwise, in materialistic life, people just change bodies from one body to another, anything from Lord Brahma down to a fish or an insect. But in the human form, people can achieve perfection. And the Vedas are the basis of all this. Very important. So if you blaspheme the Vedas, you fall down to atheism. The Sanskrit term is Nastika. Nastika means one who doesn't believe in the Vedas and concocts some religious system. An interesting point Prabhupada makes is that Lord Chaitanya said that the Buddhists are Nastikas. Because Buddha, in order to establish ahimsa, Buddha flatly refused to believe in the Vedas. But then later Shankaracharya came and stopped Buddhism and chased it out of India. So here it said, Brahmacha Brahmanan. Brahma means the Vedas. Aham Brahmasmi means I'm in full knowledge. Vedas say we should think we are Brahman, which is true. So if Brahma or Vedic spiritual science is condemned, and the masters of it, the Brahmins, are condemned, then where does human civilization stand? It's just collapsed, it's finished. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Bhrigu Muni said, it is not due to my cursing that you shall become atheists. You're already situated in the principle of atheism. Therefore you are condemned. Verse 31. The Vedas, and again this is Bhrigu Muni, the Vedas give the eternal regulative principles for auspicious advancement in human civilization, which have been rigidly followed in the past. The strong evidence of this principle is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's called Janardhan, the well-wisher of all living entities. Okay, let's have a look at the purport. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, is father of all 8,400,000 species. Yes, of course, we know that very well. They're all his sons, and the Vedas are given to them for their benefit, so they can So, to guide them in their attempts at material life, attempting to lord it over material nature. So therefore, the Vedas, they are a Purusha. Purusha, Purusha meaning a human, but apurusha, not written by any human or even a demigod, including Lord Brahma. So, Lord Brahma is not the creator or author of the Vedas. He is a creature of the world. Yes, he's one of the living beings. So he doesn't have the power to create the Vedas independently. Because every living entity, of course, has 4 defects. Commit mistakes, to be illusion, to accept one thing for another, to cheat and have imperfect senses. So the Vedas are not written by any creature of this world, so they're said to be apurusha. No one can trace out their history. Of course, interesting point Prabhupada makes. Modern human civilization has no chronological history of the world beyond 3,000 years. And no one's traced out when the Vedas were written, because they're not written by any living entity within this world, apurusha. All other systems of knowledge are defective because they have been written by humans or demigods, and even the demigods, they're products of this world. But Bhagavad Gita is a Purusha, not spoken by any person of this world, spoken by Krishna who is beyond this world. Even Shankaracharya accepted that. Yes. Narayana Paro Vyaktat, that Lord Narayan is superior to the material world. So Krishna makes it clear he's the source of everything. And Krishna says the purpose of the Vedas is to understand him. He's the original knower of the Vedas, compiler of the Vedas. Lord Brahma is not. So let's go on. I mean, this is quite a purport here. So the second paragraph. In the beginning of the Bhagavatam, it's established, Tene Brahma Rida, that the Absolute Truth was instructed, that the Absolute Truth instructed Brahma in Vedic knowledge through the heart. Therefore it's free from the 4 defects as it's spoken by the Lord, and has been followed since time immemorial, beginning with Brahma. Vedic religion principles have been followed in India since time immemorial. No one can trace out the history of Vedic religion, so it's Sanatan, it's eternal. And any blasphemy against the Vedas is atheism. And Prabhupada says the Vedas, they're like a bridge, a setu. Means a bridge. And if you want to cross the material ocean of nescience, you must take the bridge of the Vedas. So the third paragraph, Prabhupada is talking about Varnashram, the 4 divisions that the Vedas talk about, Varnashram, according to qualities and work. It's scientific and it's Sanatan, it's eternal. No one can trace out its history, and it's continuing now. And no one can stop it. Officially or unofficially, Varnashram is the current system, really. There's an intellectual class, a martial class, a productive or business type class, and a working class. They're naturally there in any society that you look at. And it's been like that from time immemorial. It's current now, and it'll continue forever. No power in this world can stop it. And we see if people do follow it, they come to higher standards of life. Yes. And then the fourth paragraph. Formerly the sages followed the system. So in other words, to follow the Vedic system is just a matter of following the basic etiquette of society. But Lord Shiva's followers, who are drunkards, addicted to ganja, sex life, sometimes meat eaters, even cannibals, don't bathe. Krishna. It's all against the standards of human life, human etiquette. So Prabhupada says the conclusion is, people who rebel against the Vedic principles, they're evidence that the Vedas are authoritative, because by rebelling against the Vedic principles, one sees they become like animals. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, such animalistic persons are themselves evidence of the supremacy of the Vedic regulations. Right, verse 32, by blaspheming the principles of the Vedas, which are the pure and supreme path of the saintly persons, certainly you followers of Bhutapati, Lord Shiva, will descend to the standard of atheism without a doubt. Okay, so here's another purport. Prabhupada says that Lord Shiva is described here as Bhutarat, means the leader of the creatures who are in the lowest standard of the modes, tamagun, yeah. But there's another meaning of Bhuta, actually. I mean, this is an interesting point. Bhuta also means anyone who's taken birth or anything which is produced. So if we take it like that, the broader understandings, then we can see that in that sense, Lord Shiva can be accepted as the father of this material world. But here, oh Krishna, Bhrigu, oh dear, takes Lord Shiva to be the leader of the lowest creatures. They've already been described. They don't bathe, they have long hair, addicted to intoxicants. So in comparison to that path, that the followers of Bhutarat, Lord Shiva, that they follow, the Vedic system is much better because it promotes people to spiritual life. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, if one decries or blasphemes the Vedic principles, then he falls to the standard of atheism. So on to the next section, section 6, which is just one verse, it's verse 33, titled, Lord Shiva leaves the sacrificial arena. Up until this point, Lord Shiva has been sitting there, and he heard the ranting of Daksha. Then he heard the ranting of Nandishvara, but he didn't do anything. Then he heard this ranting we just went through right now of Bhrigu. He's been sitting through it all. Okay, let's read the verse. The sage Maitreya said, when such cursing and counter-cursing was going on between Lord Shiva's followers and the parties of Daksha and Bhrigu, Lord Shiva became very morose. Not saying anything, he left the arena of the sacrifice, followed by his disciples. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying that here, Lord Shiva's excellent character is described, that in spite of the cursing and counter-cursing, because he's actually the greatest Vaishnav, he was sober and didn't speak. Yes. His devotees are always tolerant, and he's the topmost devotee. So his character, as displayed here, is excellent. And he felt morose, seeing all this unnecessary cursing from his people and Daksha's people, without any interest in spiritual life. Just unnecessary, completely unnecessary. Okay, we carry on. And Prabhupada explains, Lord Shiva, his position, transcendental position, Pandita Samadarshanaha, sees equally. No one's higher, no one's lower. The learned and gentle Brahmin, the outcast, the dog, the cow. That's Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, verse 18. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thus the only alternative left to Lord Shiva was to leave in order to stop his follower Nandishvara, as well as Bhrigu Muni, from cursing and counter-cursing in that way. Right, so he left. And now there's just two more verses in this chapter 34 and 35. And this is the 7th section. We've titled it, The Sacrifice is Concluded. Let's read through these verses, and they have purports. The sage Maitreya continued, O Vidura, all the progenitors of the universal population thus executed a sacrifice for thousands of years. For sacrifice is the best way to worship the Supreme Lord, Hari, the personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada says that stalwart personalities, the Prajapatis, who generate population, they're interested in satisfying the Lord by offering sacrifices. And the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 5 verse 29, of course, very famous verse, the peace formula, Bhoktaram Yagya-tapasam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the enjoyer, or is meant to be the enjoyer, or of all sacrifices and austerities. So Prabhupada makes the point, you can do sacrifice, you can do austerities, but actually they're meant to satisfy the Lord. If they're done for personal satisfaction, you're involved in pashanda, or atheism. But of course, when they're done for the Lord, one is following Vedic principles. And just like at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, Shonaka Rishi and the sages of Namsharanya, they were going to perform a sacrifice for 1,000 years. But Sutta Goswami came by and they changed their plan to worship Srimad Bhagavatam. Verse 35, my dear Vidura, carrier of bows and arrows, all the demigods who were performing the sacrifice took their bath at the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna, after completing the yajna performance, such a bath is called avabrita snana. After thus becoming purified in heart, they departed for their respective abodes. So the thing is, after Lord Shiva, and previously it was Daksha was the first one to leave the sacrifice. And then Lord Shiva, he's just left now. So, but actually the sacrifice continued to satisfy the Lord. They continued despite the absence of Daksha and Lord Shiva. In other words, Prabhupada makes an interesting point. In other words, it may be assumed that if one does not worship the demigods, even up to Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, one can nevertheless satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 20, which explains that people who are just driven by lust, they approach the demigods for material benefits. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his purport to this Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 20, he confirms this. Even if you don't worship demigods, even up to Shiva and Brahma, and there's no one higher amongst the demigods, but you can still satisfy Krishna. So in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 20, Prabhupada says that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur uses the term nashta buddhaya, persons who've lost their sense or intelligence. Only such people care for demigods and want material benefit from them. Doesn't mean we shouldn't respect them, of course we should, but there's no need to worship them. Like Prabhupada makes the point, it's a good one. There's no need to bribe government servants. You don't bribe government servants. That doesn't mean you don't respect them. Of course you should do at least. So similarly, one engaged in devotional service to Krishna doesn't need to worship demigods. But on the other hand, such a devotee doesn't have the tendency to disrespect them. Prabhupada refers here to Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 23, Yepyanya devata bhakta yajante sharayanvata. Krishna says anyone who worships the demigods is worshipping him, but in a wrong way, not according to regulative principles. And then again, when you worship the Lord, you automatically serve the demigods, because there is parts and parcels. Just like when you water the root of a tree, all the different parts of the tree are nourished. So by worshipping the Lord, one satisfies the demigods, but by worshipping them, by worshipping the demigods, one does not properly worship the Lord. So Prabhupada says, therefore worship of the demigods is irregular, and it is disrespectful to the scriptural injunctions. Kali Yuga, it's not possible to worship the demigods. Not possible. So Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.32, Yagyai Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Sumedasa. Srimad Bhagavatam recommends that Sankirtan Yagya, we do Sankirtan Yagya, chanting the holy names in public and giving Krishna consciousness to the public. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Tasmin tushte jagat tushta. When Lord Vishnu is satisfied, all the demigods who are his parts and parcels are satisfied. All right, now devotees, we just finished the second chapter and we've got some time. Let's go on to the third chapter. It's a short chapter, it's only 25 verses. It's titled Talks Between Lord Shiva and Sati. What that means is that, well, the basic idea is that Daksha, he's about to start another sacrifice. Yeah, it's not the same sacrifice. It's a little later one. So, Sati, Lord Shiva's wife, knowing that her mother and sisters and so many other friends of the family are going to be there, people who are very dear to her, Sati feels that she really must go. So therefore, Sati appeals to Lord Shiva to let her go, but Lord Shiva warns her not to go. Yeah. So there are three sections. First is verse 1 to verse 4. Daksha's preparing to do another sacrifice. Second one, verse 5 to verse 14, second section. Sati appeals to Shiva to let her go. Verse 5 to verse 14. And the second one is from verse 15 to verse 25. Lord Shiva warns Sati, don't go. All right, so let's get into it. First section, verse 1 to verse 4. Daksha prepares to do another sacrifice. Verse 1. Maitreya continued. In this manner, the tension between the father-in-law and son-in-law, Daksha and Lord Shiva, continued for a considerably long period. There are two questions here in the purport. The questions are, what is the cause of the misunderstanding between Lord Shiva and Daksha? Then, why did that strife between Daksha and Lord Shiva, Daksha and his son-in-law, cause Sati to destroy her body, or in other words, commit suicide? That's heavy, really heavy. So Prabhupada goes on. The chief reason for Sati giving up her body was because Daksha began another sacrifice, which he did not invite Lord Shiva to. That really got to Sati. That just, as they say, fried Sati completely. So generally, when any sacrifice is performed, although they're all meant to pacify the Supreme Lord, but all the demigods are invited and they take part, although the yajnas are for the Supreme Lord, actually. And therefore it's said that unless the demigods are present, no sacrifice is complete. But, in the tense situation, very difficult situation, Daksha began another sacrifice and didn't invite Lord Shiva. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Daksha was the chief progenitor employed by Lord Brahma, and he was a son of Brahma, so he had a high position and was also very proud. So on we go to verse 2. When Lord Brahma appointed Daksha the chief of all the Prajapatis, the progenitors of population, Daksha became very much puffed up. Okay, let's have a look at the purport, short purport. Despite being envious of Lord Shiva, Daksha was appointed chief of the Prajapatis. I mean, that's interesting. Why they did that, I don't know. And that was the cause of his excessive pride. Because when a person becomes too proud of their material possessions or just their position materially, then such a person can do, Prabhupada says, any disastrous act. This was the cause here. And this chapter now focuses on this, the disastrous act. Verse 3. Daksha began a sacrifice named Vaibhava, and he became excessively confident of his support by Lord Brahma. He then performed another great sacrifice named Brihaspati Sava. So Prabhupada explains that these are two sacrifices, Vaibhava, then Brihaspati Sava, Vedic sacrifices. But the thing is that if you want to do Brihaspati Sava, you have to do Vaibhava first. Yeah. That otherwise you can't do Brihaspati Sava properly. So anyway, Daksha, while doing them, neglected Lord Shiva. And actually it says, Prabhupada says, neglected great devotees like Lord Shiva. So I'm not aware of there being others, but could be. So all sacrifices are for Vishnu. They're all for Vishnu. But Vishnu is never satisfied if his devotees are neglected, of course. So Daksha had this idea, this wrong idea, that if you please Vishnu, it doesn't matter if you please his devotees or displease them, it just doesn't matter. And Prabhupada points out how, towards the bottom of the purport, it's an important verse being referred to, 11:19:21, Mad Bhakta Pujyad Yadika. The worship of my devotees is better than worship of me. Similarly, in Padma Purana, Prabhupada says, it's stated, best type of worship is to offer oblations to Vishnu. But even better is to worship the devotees. That's the famous verse. Aradhananam sarvesham Vishnu aradhanam param tasmat parataram devi tadiyanam samarchanam. Of all types of worship of Vishnu is the best, but even better is to worship Tadiya, those who are dear, like the devotees, or those things, those people who are dear to the Lord. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thus Daksha's determination to neglect Lord Shiva in the sacrifices was not fitting, really. Seriously not fitting. Verse 4. While the sacrifice was being performed, many Brahmarshis, great sages, ancestral demigods, and other demigods, their wives, all very nicely decorated with ornaments, attended from different parts of the universe. Wow, okay. So this purport here, sort of shortish, but it's important. So Prabhupada makes the point, in any auspicious ceremony, such as marriage, sacrifice, puja, it's auspicious for married women to decorate themselves nicely with ornaments, fine clothing, and cosmetics. Then they're auspicious signs. So for this Brihaspati Sava, it's the main sacrifice, actually. Many heavenly ladies came with their husbands demigods, devarshis, rajarshis. And it's said here that it is specifically mentioned in this verse that they approached with their husbands. For when a woman is decorated nicely, her husband becomes more cheerful. Yes, I mean, it's very true. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the nice decorations, ornaments, and dress of the wives of the demigods and sages, and the cheerfulness of the demigods and sages themselves, were all auspicious signs for the ceremony. Right, so now the second section is from verse 5 to verse 14. So it's a bit longer, a little bit. And we call it Sati appeals to Shiva to let her go to the big sacrifice. So let me just read, first of all, the verses from 5 to 14. Verses 5 to 7. The chaste lady Sati, the daughter of Daksha, heard the heavenly denizens flying in the sky, conversing about the great sacrifice being performed by her father. When she saw that from all directions the beautiful wives of the heavenly denizens, their eyes very beautifully glittering, were near her residence and were going to the sacrifice dressed in fine clothing and ornamented with earrings and necklaces with lockets, she approached her husband, the master of the Bhutas, in great anxiety, and spoke as follows. Verse 8. Sati said, my dear Lord Shiva, your father-in-law is now executing great sacrifices, and all the demigods, having been invited by him, are going there. If you desire, we may also go. Verse 9. I think that all my sisters must have gone to this great sacrificial ceremony with their husbands, just to see their relatives. I also desire to decorate myself with the ornaments given to me by my father, and go there with you to participate in that assembly. Verse 10. My sisters, my mother's sisters and their husbands, and other affectionate relatives must be assembled there. So if I go, I shall be able to see them, and I shall be able to see the flapping flags and the performance of the sacrifice by the great sages. For these reasons, my dear husband, I'm very much anxious to go. Verse 11. This manifested cosmos is a wonderful creation of the interaction of the three material modes, or the external energy of the Supreme Lord. This truth is fully known to you. Yet I am but a poor woman, and as you know, I'm not conversant with the truth. Therefore I wish to see my birthplace once more. 12. O never born, O blue-throated one, not only my relatives, but also other women, dressed in nice clothes and decorated with ornaments, are going there with their husbands and friends. Just see how their flocks of white airplanes have made the entire sky very beautiful. 13. O best of the demigods, how can the body of a daughter remain undisturbed when she hears that some festive event is taking place in her father's house? Even though you may be considering that I've not been invited, there's no harm if one goes to the house of one's friend, husband, spiritual master or father without invitation. 14. O immortal Shiva, please be kind towards me and fulfill my desire. You've accepted me as half of your body. Therefore, please show kindness towards me and accept my request. Okay, Okay, so now we'll go back and we'll read through the verses again, but with the purports. Okay, so we begin by reading verses 5 to 7, 3 verses altogether. The chaste lady Sati, the daughter of Daksha, heard the heavenly denizens flying in the sky, conversing about the great sacrifice being performed by her father. When she saw that from all directions, the beautiful wives of the heavenly denizens, their eyes very beautifully glittering, were near her residence, and were going to the sacrifice, dressed in fine clothing and ornaments, with earrings and necklaces, with lockets, she approached her husband, the master of the Bhutas, in great anxiety, and spoke as follows. She wants to go, because she knows all these nice people will be there, her mother, her sisters, and so many others, and she's got that real attraction for a kind of social situation. So Prabhupada begins the purport by making kind of interesting, striking statement. It appears that the residence of Lord Shiva was not on this planet, but somewhere in outer space. Otherwise, how could Sati have seen the airplanes coming from different directions towards this planet and heard the passengers talking about the great sacrifice being performed by Daksha? Sati is described. Okay. So she's described here as Dakshayani, the daughter of Daksha. So Prabhupada says the mention of Upadevavara refers to inferior demigods like Gandharvas, Kinnaras, and Urigas. They're not exactly demigods, but they're somewhere in between demigods and humans. And they were passing right next to Lord Shiva and Sati's place where they were staying. So the dresses and bodily features of these wives of the heavenly denizens are very nicely described here. The dresses and bodily features. So their eyes moved, earrings and other ornaments glittered. The dresses were the clothing was the very nicest. They all had special lockets on their necklaces. Each one was accompanied by their husband. Thus they looked so beautiful that Sati Dakshayani was impelled to dress similarly and go to the sacrifice with a husband. That is the natural inclination of a woman. Okay, so now verse 8. Sati said, "My dear Lord Shiva, your father-in-law is now executing great sacrifices, and all the demigods being invited by him are going there. If you desire, we may also go." So there's a shortish purport there. Prabhupada. Prabhupada says Sati knew of the tension between Shiva and Daksha. Yeah, she really knew. She was there in the first situation. But still she told him she wanted to go. And Prabhupada makes the point that she couldn't exactly express her willingness directly. So the way she put it was, if you want to go, then I'll come with you. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in other words, she submitted her desire very politely to her husband. 9. I think that all my sisters must have gone to this great sacrificial ceremony with their husbands just to see their relatives. I also desire to decorate myself with the ornaments given to me by my father and go there with you to participate in that assembly. So Prabhupada says, woman's nature is to decorate herself, ornaments, clothes, and so on, go to social events with the husband, meet the relatives, enjoy life together. And Prabhupada says, this is not unusual. This is not unusual. As woman is the basic principle of material enjoyment. Stri. In Sanskrit, the word for woman is stri, one who expands the field of material enjoyment. So male and female, of course, they attract each other, and then the scope of their material life expands. House, wealth, children, etc. So instead of decreasing material demands, ladies have a tendency to increase them. But Lord Shiva is different, so therefore his name is Shiva. He's not attracted like that. He's Shiva, he's auspicious. But here Sati is very attracted. She's the daughter of a great king, given to Lord Shiva by the request of Brahma, so she wanted to go to her father's place and associate there, decorate herself with ornaments given by her father. And we should note, she didn't say she would decorate herself with ornaments given by her husband, as he didn't usually give her such things, because he's always in ecstasy, remembering the Lord. So according to Vedic system, of course, the daughter, time of marriage, is given dowry. So Sati had plenty of these things, jewelry and ornaments and all sorts of things that she'd been given at the time of marriage. But normally the husband also, he can give such things. But in her case, her husband, Lord Shiva, was materially almost nothing, so he couldn't. So therefore she wanted to decorate herself with things given by her father. And Prabhupada makes a point here that, yes, interesting. Fortunately, Shiva didn't take her ornaments and spend them for Ganja, as do many of those who worship him. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, those who imitate Lord Shiva in smoking Ganja exploit everything from household affairs. They take all of their wives' property and spend it on smoking, intoxication, and similar other activities. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.